Hey, what's up, guys? It's your boy Days, and you're about to watch Thorin rant for about 3 hours.
NRG have won CS Summit 3 in strong fashion overall. They didn't lose a single series. They won 3 straight best of 3s and then a best of 5 in the final, albeit with a 1-0 start coming from the winners bracket. They only lost 3 maps total over those 4 series. There was a train overtime game loss against Ghost. There was, an admittedly large loss against Big on Overpass, and then in the final they lost 16-14 to Optic on Nuke. So 2 of the losses that they did even suffer in the tournament were incredibly close, 16-14 or overtime. They won over the tournament on 5 different maps. They had Inferno, Nuke, Train, Overpass and Mirage. They were the top-ranked team at the tournament, and thus, as we discussed this run, they were supposed to win the tournament. They were the number 1 ranked team of the teams attending. They were the only top 10 ranked team in the tournament. I think they're ranked number 6 on my rankings. Now, their success earlier in the year supersedes anything anyone else in this tournament has done. They were in the final of Star Series Season 5. They had top 4 ECS Season 5. They won IEM Shanghai, sure, not a massive tournament, but a lot of prize money. IEM is obviously a brand associated with prestige, and, getting a win under your belt and getting a trophy is a big deal. Problem is, they didn't qualify for the major, which in itself was a shock, bearing in mind it was teams like Rogue and Complexity going instead. Literal Who in that scenario at the time that those teams qualified. They went to Star Series Season 5, most recently, Season 6 rather, and they only made the semi-finals. They didn't even make the final or win the tournament, even though, again, they were one of the favourites. They were slightly behind Mousespots in terms of the rankings. But after them, they should have been in the final once Mousespots didn't make the playoffs. Actually expected to win the tournament outright. They lost to Vega Squadron, big-time underdogs in the semi-final. Before that, before the major, they had actually finished last place at DreamHack Masters Stockholm. So this was a team that clearly has some talent, has had some big results, but needs, first of all, some consistency and needs a big win. Oh yeah, also they had top 4 ESL New York, but then lost to Mousespots there, even when they'd looked strong, even when they'd beaten out FaZe Clan themselves in a best of 3. The setting, I think, was key for this team winning the title, because this is a tournament that, just as Team Liquid won it at the beginning of the year, but hasn't won any other big international titles. It's in a house, there's no stage, there's no crowd, there's more of a fun vibe to it, even though the matches themselves are serious. As a result, this is an ideal tournament to show off kind of what your performance level's like without the intangible factors of big stage pressure and all the crowd watching you and who they're cheering for and how you psych yourself out in your head in the walk up to the stage or reacting to losses between maps. This is more like, what's your everyday level? What's your actual ability and potential as a team outside of those concepts? And so I often call Team Liquid mini Astralis because they have many of the same qualities. They just haven't quite gotten to that level. Well, I think in that sense that actually this team is mini Team Liquid. And so obviously this is one respect in which they fulfill that, in that they also have had their issues in the big playoff matches that are in stage settings, big tournaments. In their case, they're typically only going to the semi-finals. They had the one final at Star Series, but Team Liquid obviously has their issues largely in the finals. Now, I also think the format of this tournament was also great for this team going against lower-ranked squads, because it's double elimination, so they had 2 lives. They didn't end up even needing one. It's all best-of-3 series until the final, so no best-of-1s, no team just banning 3 maps you like and then getting lucky against you on your 4th best map or playing on your 3rd best map and getting a fluke 16-14 win. None of that nonsense going on. If you are the better team and you're a real team like they are with a map pool who plays real Counter-Strike, you've got a very good chance to win, and indeed they went ahead and won and were not ultimately upset. Let's go through some of the series that they played in. So the first series was against Steel and Wardell's Ghost Gaming, and this was actually the closest series that NRG played in the entire tournament. It was one of the very closest series of the entire tournament for everyone. It was a 3-game series where both teams absolutely could have won each of the 3 maps. The team NRG ended up losing the opening map overtime on Train after having a big lead. They then won the next map. I can't remember what the order of the maps was, but I know they won a nuke at one point in time. And overall, they took the series 2-1. Very, very close series. Sure, some flaws were shown by NRG, some lack of poise and composure at times. Didn't ultimately end up mattering. They got through this tough game. It was something of a character building game, really gave them a wake up at the beginning of the tournament. And the next tournament match they played was against Heroic. Now, the nuke game was a close map, But to be fair, that's not the best map for NRG. It's Heroic's pick. It's inarguably Heroic's best map. And actually, after getting through that with VeXii hard carrying the game, Overpass, the pick of the guys from NRG, was easy. And they won the series 2-0. In the winners bracket final, they met Big, the other top-ranked team at the tournament, the next highest-ranked team. This was a 3-game series, but it wasn't ultimately that close overall. They won Big's train pick. Obviously, it's a strong map for NRG. They lost their own pick of Overpass, which looked shocking and kind of a bit worrying at first, but then they won Inferno heavily, a map that actually, I know it was Big, had been somewhat steering away from at times in their vetoes here, despite being strong on it when they came into the scene for ESL 1 Cologne and that epic run, and they won that Inferno game heavily, which was a very, very positive sign. Now, in this series, it was actually Fugly who went ham, and particularly on train. He was the big difference maker there to help them win that map, and therefore win the series, go to the final with the 1-game advantage in the best of 5. Now, they didn't meet Big there in the rematch, because Optic slaughtered Big in the lower bracket final, and so it was Optic they met in the final, a team that actually they had not faced at this point in time. They faced 4 different opponents. They only lost the opener in 30 rounds. It was 16-14 on Nuke, and Nuke was a specialist pick for Optic. And again, like I said, it's not exactly the best map for Heroic, even though it's certainly a solid map and one they can play. In the final, they got great production from their big 3, their trio, Cirque, Breeze, Ethan. Fantastic overall. For the tournament, I give the MVP to VeXii myself. I think he was by far the best player. Had a very consistent game, seemed to understand how to play within his limits. I also thought he was fabulous at Star Series Season 6. Could have been the MVP there if they'd have gone to the final or won it. For my money, Sean Gares, I had a discussion with, he agrees with me. I think right now, VeXii's the best player in this team. Cirque's had some issues. Ethan's a little bit more quiet and just has occasional games or puts up the frags, but there's not always the same crazy impact in the game. VeXii's game is the very consistent one. Fabulous rifle game all around. Seems like the more complete player, and as a result is doing it day in and day out. And so for me, he's currently the best player in this team. Now, what I like about this team is they do try to play real Counter-Strike. I've got to give a lot of credit to Daps for being able to set up a real team and actually have his team play proper Counter-Strike and not just play gambly, gimmicky shit that NA teams are famous for. And as such, they've been able to actually establish a map pool, establish solid results, and get those big upsets, even in best of 3s, over international teams. Team Liquid, FaZe Clan. Now, what I like is, I referred to them before as a mini Team Liquid, so I'll explain that, because in doing so, I'll explain the way I model their team. So first of all, like Team Liquid, where oftentimes they didn't have one guy stepping out as a star player, they had the trio of 3 who get it done by committee. So in Team Liquid, it's Elige, Twists, and Naf. Well, in this team, it's VeXii, it's Ethan, it's Cirque, and they're very different styles of player as well, hence why they're able to do it by committee. Now, I think they have similar issues to Team Liquid in the sense that they really need one of those guys to be a true world superstar, top 5 player in the world. So obviously, in Team Liquid more recently, that's been Twists, but actually he didn't particularly show up at Epicenter. It was gonna be Cirque, based on the first sort of 4 to 5 months of this team's line. He was the one having the big carry performances, but I've noticed he had his issues against the top level teams and in the big stage matches. So as I say, at the moment, VeXii's the guy standing forward and seeming to edge towards that territory of being a top player in the world, but he needs more tournaments of consistency to really prove it to me overall. They've got the support player who is usually underrated, but does a lot of work. So obviously that's Taco in Team Liquid, Zipnik's over in Astralis. Now those teams have won and gone deep enough that those players no longer are underrated. But I think Fugly is underrated in this team because he's the guy who everyone thought was surplus to requirements. Like, oh, why is he sticking around this team? Oh, he's just here from the God B days. He's not a good guy. He was kicked out of Team Liquid. This guy's doing his fucking job in this team. I'm impressed with the role that Fugly's playing, the production level, the numbers that he's putting out, and the role he's being able to fill within this squad to allow those guys to shine. He's the guy, along with Daps, who has to be making that supportive base to the team to allow the other star players to have their big numbers, to shine, to do what they want to do in the game. So give him some credit. And obviously, like I said, was the guy who carried in the series against Big and particularly on train. Then you've got the in-game leader. Okay, that's very different to Team Liquid because Nitro's not a traditional in-game leader, even though he's developed some of those skills. Daps has always been in-game leader material. And people thought I was crazy when Cloud9 back in 2017 needed roster moves. And I said the players I'd be looking at is FNS and Daps. Now, everyone remembers FNS because he did get recruited, not for very long admittedly, and for whatever reasons that didn't work out. The reason I picked Daps is this guy can set up a team. This guy has proven that again and again, and I thought, as you've seen with this team, give him some real talents to work with, and actually I think he could go to the next level as well. Now, can he be one of the very best in-game leaders in the world? I'd go ahead and say probably not. I feel like where they're at currently is probably where you'd expect his level could take him to. So unless the superstar players develop out of their team, he's probably not going to go much higher in the world, but what a respectable job he's already done. This is a guy getting his team bordering on top 5 material in the world here. Some very legit performances and top placings, so I'm impressed with him. I've always thought he's someone who had his head on his shoulders. He's maybe not as much of a strong leader as he might need, but he's got the perfect team for it in that sense. It's a very quiet, reserved bunch of guys. He sets up the game, he shows them how to play the game, and then they go out and do it, and he doesn't have a whole lot of egos to work with. Now, the issues this team has, first of all, let's start beyond the player issues. Like I said, some of them don't necessarily always show up. I think Cirque's a bit gimmicky as an AWPer, but there's still time to develop there. They're still very young players, that core of stars. That can change over time as they learn and get their feet under them in these big matches and go through the hard times of the losses, as you saw with the Astralis core in the past, as you saw with Team Liquid last year, as you've seen to some degree with Team Liquid a bit this year. For me, it's the map pool that really needs to be improved because they're so good on overpass that they pick it against everyone, basically. And their overpass is very, very good. They probably have a top 5 overpass in the world. And my problem there is I feel like they have an over-reliance on it because the only time they haven't picked it in recent history was against FaZe at ESL New York, and they still won the series anyway. Everyone else, they always pick it. And so as a result, I don't think they're actually getting enough games and showing confidence in the rest of their map pool, because it's very good, but any team that takes overpass against them, out of the equation against them, immediately has a chance to get the upset or to outright just beat NRG. Their Inferno is good, but I don't think it's world class. They've shown some flaws with it. The other maps are solid, like they have a wide map pool, but it's the depth I'm concerned about. So Mirage, they can have some fabulous games, they can have some so-so games, it's all over the place. Nuke, it's a pretty solid map, it's not one you'd see them picking, because it's not one they can have strong confidence in. Train, okay, they sometimes pick it if overpass isn't available. It can be good, it can also be pretty iffy. You see a lot of close games from on it. Cash is decent, but doesn't seem to be one that they go into very much. I'd be using that as a punish pick if I was them. And Dust 2 just is not there at all. So that's a map that's just completely out of the equation. So I think they're a pretty solid team. I actually like to watch them play. They play real Counter-Strike. I like the setup of the team. People are in all the correct roles. They need some development from the trio of stars. That's true. The rest of the team does their job, but maybe exist on a lower level for a reason. They're a solid team. They won a tournament here that sure didn't have the best teams in the world, but they did it anyway. They didn't lose a series. Respect to NRG for their accomplishment. This video was kindly supported by Andreas, Snazore, Westerlund, Dean Tanglis, Gardner Wilson, Landon Thompson, NateDOhDoubleG, Kyla Harris, Travis Greb, James Harding, Daniel Yordanov, VeXii, Robert Baxter, and a special thanks goes out as always to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content? Would you like to ask me a question in my monthly AMA? Would you fancy a few teasers for what's coming up in my content? How about taking part in an esports discussion with me? Well, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.